Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Denise Harlow. I'm CEO of the National Community Action Partnership. And today, Community Action comes together in fellowship with one another from across this country, coast to coast and beyond, to recognize and commemorate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Many of you on Monday had a day of service. We know that your career, your path, the work you do every day is in honor and in service to the ideals given and shared with us by Dr. King. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Today, I do want to recognize that every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to today, to this very moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Today's webinar is being hosted on the lands of the Piscataway and Anacostan peoples, and I pay my respect to the elders present and today who have brought us to this moment. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to dig deep into our roots in community action. We hope that you will leave refreshed, inspired, ready to tackle what 2024 has to bring. This is the first major event of the partnership's 2024 calendar, and it's an incredibly important moment. We're going to get started here in a few moments with our musical selection. We're going to have opening remarks from our board chair. Our keynote address will be offered by the wonderful Thelma French. We're going to share tools and resources for your local agency, your community, your families that you serve, and we'll offer some closing remarks. Next slide, please. And all of this, right, we see in the promise of community action. So behind the scenes, say it with me, right? Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And today, I think you're going to hear the theme. We care about the entire community repeatedly, and we hang our hat on so much of that in our work. Next slide, please. I hope that you'll see this promise in Dr. King's messages, right? The work of the civil rights movement of Reverend King and so many others, again, has led us to the moment and is central in our promise that everybody should have access to the opportunity to succeed. That's what we believe. That's what we live in community action. Next slide, please. You'll see this hopefully reflected in our value statements. You can see them here. I'm not going to read them all, but I'll start off with number 1. We believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect and recognize that structural race, gender, and other inequities remain barriers that must be addressed. These are the value statements that have been drafted and approved by the National Community Action Partnership Board of Directors. I encourage you at local agencies, state associations, state offices to review these value statements regularly. Speak them out loud. Put them into your space. Make them real for you, your family, and your colleagues. Next slide, please. Our vision in community action is a nation that creates opportunities for all people. Again, key language, all people to thrive, builds strong, resilient communities, and ensures, again, a more equitable society. That is why we do this work. Next slide, please. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce our board chair, who many of you know I'm sorry, before I get to the board chair, my apologies. If you could go to the slide with our soloist, please. Our soloist today is Ms. Avery Berkeley. Ms. Berkeley is a musician and scholar with a passion for spreading the joy of music. And when you hear her voice, you will feel that in your soul. She recently graduated from Spelman College in May of 23 with magna cum laude, BA in music and with a minor in English. She is an inductee to the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society and a graduated member of the Eta Kappa chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Ms. Berkeley, thank you for blessing us with your voice here today. We're here to hear the Black National Anthem, lift every voice, and sing.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might light us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee, shadowed beneath Thy hand. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Oh, true to our God, true to our native land. True to our God, true to our native land. Thank you.
Stunning, stunning. Thank you. Ms. Berkeley, thank you so much for sharing your gift with us. I hope you see the love in the chat as you were singing. Just so much appreciation coming your way. Again, thank you so much for sharing your gifts with Community
Thank you.
Action. We so appreciate you.
Happy to sing for you all. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Pleased to bring to the stage Dr. Delitzo Sulamoyo, the National Partnerships Board Chair and also Chief Executive Officer of his own local organization, the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. I've known Delitzo probably 16, 17 years at this point, a mentor, someone who inspires me every day, who is leading this organization every day into the future of the unknown. Delitzo, thank you so much for being with us here today. We welcome and we sit and listen to your comments here today.
Well, thank you so much, Denise, for that very kind introduction. On this very special day, we continue to celebrate the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which was on the January 15th. This past Monday would have been Dr. King's 95th birthday. A week before his birthday, we commemorated the 60th anniversary of when President Lyndon Johnson declared the war on poverty during his State of the Union address before Congress. As we reflect on the significance of these two very important events that have helped to shape the psyche of our nation, we need to contextualize them to the present by answering and exploring some critical questions. Why do we celebrate Dr. King's birthday as a national holiday? Is it because he marched for the civil rights in the 1960s? Is it because he had a dream for a more perfect union? On the day when we celebrate Dr. King's birthday, we have breakfasts, we have marches, there are scholarships that are given, great speeches are made by politicians and civic leaders. These are indeed great ways for us to celebrate what Dr. King did for all of us and for this nation. But Dr. King's birthday should be a reminder for us to speak truth to power, to stand up for what is right, regardless of whether it is politically incorrect or politically inconvenient to do so. It should be a catalyst for us to stand up for the poor and to stand up for those who are marginalized in our society. It should be a motivator for us to stand up for the inconvenient truth. We should never retreat on the dream for equality, equity, and economic freedom. We should press on until injustice is truly an anathema of the past. How are we showing up for Dr. King today? How are we keeping his dream alive? What would Dr. King observe if he were still alive today? I cannot help but think about what he would observe if he were still alive today. He would find that while there's been a lot of progress, we are a country and a world still struggling with many of the ills of social and economic injustice he fought against more than 5 decades ago. He would find that even though there's been great progress made, we still have a long way to go to get to a perfect union and to the promised land. He would find that African Americans are still facing police brutality and mass incarceration for many crimes that their counterparts are imprisoned for much less time. He would find that our communities are deluged with gun violence. He would find, as he stated, that the tragic walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort and the inner city of poverty and despair have not been completely crushed with the forces of justice. He would find, as he stated, that those who live on the outskirts of hope have not been fully brought into the metropolis of daily security. He would find a country so divided against political lines that it has paralyzed progress on some fronts. At a time when the world is engulfed in regional conflicts of war on multiple continents, he would find the deep divisions that existed then are still prevalent today, and in some respects, growing. Dr. King would find that there are ongoing efforts to shatter his dream piece by piece. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, between January 1st and May 29th of 2023, at least 11 states enacted 13 voter restrictive laws. Of these laws, 7 curb access to mail voting and 6 implement stricter voter ID requirements for voter registration or in-person voting. A law passed in Florida targets voter registration efforts in a manner that could shut down registration drives in advance of the 2024 election. So today's challenges are all of our responsibility to resolve so that we may create a more just society. We should not tolerate and accept a divided society where inequalities are so apparent physically, economically, socially, and to some extent, emotionally. Dr. King would be comforted to know that he left a great legacy and blueprint for his work to continue despite the challenges that exist today. He'll be pleased to know that there are most soldiers who come from different backgrounds, race, creed, and sexual orientation and identity, fighting against racial, social, and economic injustice. They are children of former slaves and slave owners who have joined hands to fight against oppression in this country. He'll be pleased to know that the community action movement is still fighting for those living at the social and economic margins of our society. Our network, through the leadership of the National Community Action Partnership, has continued to fashion itself on the ideals that Dr. King set forth for the world. There are great parallels between Dr. King's I Have a Dream and I've Been to the Mountaintop speeches with the promise of community action. As Dr. King envisioned a country that ensured equitable access to the American dream, community action agencies have continued to collectively change people's lives, embody the spirit of hope, improve communities, and we're striving and working hard to make America a better place to live for everyone during these trying times. Community action believes in the promise that everyone should have access to the opportunity for success. Dr. King saw the correlation between poverty and racial injustice, which is why he led the Poor People's Campaign in 1968. The intersectionality that exists among poverty, racism, and discrimination is the reason why we must continue to fully engage in our racial equity work. We believe all people should be treated with dignity and respect, and recognize that structural race, gender, and other inequities remain barriers that must be addressed. This is why the National Community Action Partnership established the Equity and Economic Mobility Commission. The commission continues to lead on community racial healing and relationship building, narrative change, immigration and migration, public safety, criminal justice reform, housing, health equity, energy justice, and food security, to mention just a few. Finally, as Dr. King did, community action continues to believe that this nation has the capacity and moral obligation to ensure that no one is forced to endure the hardships of poverty and discrimination. And as Dr. King said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Keep moving forward, community action. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delitzo. Keep moving forward. That's what we're trying to do in community action every day. Keep moving forward. And our keynoter today has decades of experience of moving forward, whether it's her community action agency, the city of New Orleans, the passion for the work that she brings every day. As you've seen, the leader of the National Partnerships Board of Directors is passionate about this work. I am pleased now to introduce Ms. Thelma French, the president and CEO of Total Community Action in New Orleans. Many of you who've been to our events in New Orleans have met Thelma. If you know Thelma, you know she's a powerhouse on all things. She serves in many leadership capacities beyond serving as president and CEO of TCA. As Delitzo mentioned, we have our Equity and Economic Mobility Commission that Thelma sits on. She's also the co-chair to the Head Start Task Force that we house here at the National Partnerships Office. Thelma, we just are always so moved by you, your whole team at Total Community Action. We are so pleased that you're with us here today to be our keynoter and offer us remarks on this incredibly special and important day. Thelma, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Great afternoon, my community action colleagues. I am humbly grateful to have been given the opportunity to participate in the National Community Action Annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Commemoration webinar. Before I begin, I'd like to say, while we are all on the same brain path and thought pattern, as I listened to our board chairman, I was like, oh, we're going to be repeating each other. But I know that our approaches will be a little different. I begin by telling a brief story. 15 years ago, while celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Children's Defense Fund, I was given the opportunity to lead a local observance of the Children's Sabbath that centered on this question: when will we hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s call to end poverty in America? As I reflected on my response to that question, I found my focus for today's conversation. The question I asked: what would Dr. King think if he returned to be with us for a day? Would he be surprised if he stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to learn that a monument in his honor was erected on the same grassy Washington Mall that extends from Lincoln to the Capitol? Would he be amazed by the federal holiday in his name, or by the number of streets named for him in the Black community? Or from his vantage point on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, would he look in his mind's eye past the monument and feel utter dismay and disbelief that so many still have been left behind in poverty in our rich nation? Would it stop him in his tracks to realize that our nation has failed to make the needed and possible progress over the past 55 years, and that on the day celebrating his memory, that of the 74 million children that live in America, 11 million live in poverty? Would he look at the mall for the protest when he hears that 1 in 6 children under the age of 5, actually 3 million, live in poverty, the highest rate for any age group? When Dr. King died in 1968, calling for a campaign to end poverty in America, there were 25.4 million poor Americans, including 11 million children. Today, there are 37.9 million, 11.5% of our population, living in poverty, including 11 million children. So where are we today, and where do we go from here? The year 2023 was a significant year. It marked the 55th anniversary of Dr. King's death and the 55th anniversary of the Poor People's Campaign, which challenged our nation to end poverty, afflicting millions of Americans of all races, and to confront the entrenched, what Dr. King called triple evils of racism, excessive materialism, and militarism that threaten our nation and our world. Reflecting upon the 55 years since the assassination of Dr. King, one singular point always stands out: a searing reminder of what was and still is America's grossest injustice, that in one of the richest nations in the world, so million people
Okay, I found.
remain trapped in cyclical, soul-crushing poverty. We live in a time of unbearable distance between promise and performance, between good politics and good policy, between professed and practiced family values, between a racial creed and a racial deed, between calls for community and rampant individualism and greed. Something is awry when the net worth of the world's 3,194 billionaires exceeds the combined gross GDP of the 138 poorest countries. Something is awry in the United States when nearly 1.7 million families lived on less income than was received last year by one private equity firm executive. Let me repeat that. Something is awry when in the United States, nearly 1.7 million families lived on less income than was received last year by one private equity firm executive. When the average CEO of a large company makes more in one day than an average worker makes in a whole year. To quote the social justice activist Brian Stevenson, the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. So as I bring my reflections to a close, I wish to pose a new question. If Dr. King joined us today, would he find today's community action leaders agents of change, committed to equity, voices and advocates for justice for all children, leading by conviction rather than conformity, innovating and responsive to the changing dynamics of our communities, states, and nation, understanding the difference between charity and justice, never giving in to despair or giving up, pushing through and moving the agenda, and most of all, keeping Dr. King's vision for a new world and a beloved community for all before us. I truly believe we are ready to be the agents of change that our nation needs today. Dr. King was a prolific orator, and many of his words and speeches are endeared to many of us. But as I close this reflection, I've chose one of my favorites. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You don't have to know Plato or Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the theory of thermodynamics and physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. So as I close, my colleagues, let us continue to have a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love, and keep the promise of community action. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Thelma. Community Action Network, we need to make some noise in the chat for a wonderful, inspirational speech today. Thank you so much. It's right on time. And I want to thank everyone who is thinking of questions as we speak. Thelma, it looks like we already have one question in the chat from your colleague, Liz Kwapala, who is a fellow EEMC commissioner with yourself. And her question is, can you provide advice for how to think about incremental change versus radical transformational change? How do we navigate this both for needed urgent change. I'll put this in the chat for you as well, Thelma, but also want to encourage those who may have questions to use that Q&A feature to engage in some dialogue today.
I think that my immediate response would be, we have to always be cognizant of who we are and where we are. And while we know that strategic or incremental change is sometimes frustrating, as long as we have a vision and a goal and strategically begin to build the partnerships and the steps, I know that our changing political environments are going to really task us to be more strategic. And I like the fact that you began the conversation. How do we make strategic steps? And I think we begin by beginning to pick up our small partners and our small ideas and build that coalition. Community action, we've got to build coalitions in our communities. We may be the ones that go out front, but we have to have our colleagues coming along with us. Partnership building has been strategic to the impact that we've been able to move in our community, and not always being the leader. Being a good collaborator and a good partner is as valuable as being the leader.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Thelma. So again, colleagues, want to encourage additional questions using that Q&A feature. And Thelma, you've done so much. You've been around as a leader for a while. You've worn many hats, from academia to public service to community action and grassroots leadership. Can you, in your own words, based on your experience, just speak to what inspired you? Because sometimes this work can get tiring and exhausting, right? But what you draw on in terms of inspiration and maybe what leaders who are listening here today may want to think about tapping into as we seek to live into Dr. King's dream more effectively.
I think the first thing is getting to know thyself and defining thyself and thy purpose, and then beginning to figure out what with my skill set and my strengths and even my limitations will allow me to define where I best fit. Everyone will not be a strategic leader, and everyone cannot be the one that carries the ball, but there has to be the person that puts the blocks out there. As Tiffany has said, I've had quite a few careers, and the word I said recently when being recognized in my own community was, and I've had some of the best mentors in the world. And so to my colleagues who are at the top of the organizational chart, please remember to mentor and bring up the next generation. Spend some time, because I didn't wake up one day and become the chief of staff for the mayor of the city of New Orleans. I didn't wake up one day and be able to make the decision and serve on the Community Action Board and be an active board member because it was all in my DNA. It was because at every step of my life, I have been blessed to have mentors and to be able to receive the mentoring. And that's a two-way street. You can try and mentor, but the mentee has to be receiving. And so to my young colleagues out there, we'll never know it all. And so in the footsteps of Dr. King, who was always a scholar, who always went back to the great theorists, to the great philosophers, who often reflected all the way back to the Bible, we must always look before us and look behind us and learn from the lessons learned.
Thank you so much for that, Thelma. And so Denise has put in the chat for everyone here that quote that Dr. King offered up to us that is so powerful and well known by many of us in his I Have a Dream speech, and I quote, it says, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," end quote. And so as you reflect on this passage, this quote, what comes to mind for you? There's several colleagues that have spoken into this, and we would love for you to speak a little bit more to that as well.
Tiffany and Denise, you know that a week ago that was going to be the focus of my speech, because we have a nation now that not only judges our children by the color of their skin, by their address, and by the limitations of community. And so when can we begin to look at every child as an individual? When can we judge and make our predictions? You know, I remember when I first came out of graduate school and I learned that by 3rd grade reading scores, states decided how many prisons they were going to need. And I just could not imagine that. And so now we have a nation that looks at children by their address, not only the color of their skin or their 3rd grade reading level, when we have not given them the access or the opportunities to achieve. And so I hope that one day my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren will first be looked at by their character and by their accomplishments and not by the color of their skin.
So, Thelma, can you turn your gaze a little more pointedly towards the future? Like, turn your gaze more pointedly towards the future, because some people.
I'm excited about, I always want to look forward to the future. I'm not a pessimist. I do see challenges and I see a tough road. In fact, I believe that we're going to see some, or need to have some 60s type activism in the next 8 years. Immediately for some of us in this year. And that we're going to have to organize and truly organize cross-gender, cross-race, cross-ethnicity to ensure that everyone has an opportunity. Access and opportunity, I enjoy the healthy discussions with my colleagues on equity on the commission, as well as with my colleagues in my local area about the word equity. And I think the key word for me is opportunity and access. And so to ensure that everyone, irregardless of their place or statute, has the access, whether they choose it or not, is still going to be the individual. But we have to fight for access. I don't want to be pessimistic about this nation, but I think we need to be up for the challenge. And we're going to have to hold our elected officials. First, we have to vote. And my state is a prime example of what taking the vote for granted will happen. We have a new governor elected on a 26% voter turnout. We've got to vote. We've got to empower and encourage not only the people we assist, serve, and support, but we got to start in our own households. Everybody's got to vote. And we've got to take that right as the right for, because we have nothing to say. If you don't vote, don't tell me about how bad it is. And so, I don't want to drift too far there, but I do believe that as community action, and when I recently had the opportunity to define what maximum feasible participation is, it means empowering people to fully participate in our community, our government, and all systems, empowering and supporting participation. And so we've got to go back to grassroots community action.
Thank you so much. And so as we close today, are there any last parting words, Thelma, that you would like to leave with us?
Now, I just looked in the chat myself because I saw something that caught my eye, and I think my colleague has hit it on the nail. We have to start local and then go national. You can't complain if you haven't done what you need to do at home. And what I want to say is I feel blessed that I grew up in a great society. I can actually remember things that my kids are now learning about, and that is I got to see Dr. King. I tell a wonderful story that I was part of the early civil rights movement when I was 6 years old. And that's an interesting story, but it's a true story because I attended and I want to call our school correctly, a laboratory school on a college campus. And H. Rap Brown was the president of the student body of our school. And he took all of our lunch money and used it to support SNCC. So I can honestly say I was a part of the earliest civil rights movement. And I believe that those experiences and the power of what the impact was have led to the fact that we can't stop fighting. We got to keep on pushing, and we can win. And Dr. King will be proud if he ever comes to visit us again.
Thank you so much, Thelma. I invite all my colleagues to use that chat to make some more noise. Thelma has said, keep on pushing. As she gazed towards the future, she has emphasized just the importance of the investment in our children and keeping our eyes fixed on justice and access to opportunity for all of us. Thelma, thank you so much. We appreciate you today. You are absolutely an inspiration. Thank you.
And I thank you all again for the opportunity.
Wonderful. So at this time, everyone, we are going to shift really quickly towards just a reminder, really more so related to resources. And as we are thinking about that, just want to mention, as Delitso and Thelma have spoken to, that we have a National Equity and Economic Mobility Commission, and they've really played a key pivotal role in terms of the national board's thinking and the National Community Action Partnerships staff thinking as it relates to key considerations related to equity, and especially their intersection with community actions, mission, vision, and values. And a part of that is some narrative change work that they've been working on, where they are in the process of curating and really putting into our own words as community action definitions to key terms that relate to equity in the community action mission, vision, and values. And so as this team was preparing for today's webinar, we thought that it would be great to just surface this definition of equity for you, and to ask you for your input around the definition of equity. The definition that you see here, it says that equity is a condition whereby all people have access to a thriving reality and belonging, regardless of race, culture, gender, religion, economic status, or social location. And that is a quote from the Othering and Belonging Institute. The question for us, though, is, as community action leaders, what does that term equity mean to us? And so the NCAP team has put a link in the chat, or will put a link in the chat at this time, or a note in the chat. They're saying go to menti.com and use the code 65944039. You can also utilize your cell phone and the QR code that you see there. And so we would just like to invite you to just take a minute to use, in your own words, your definition of equity. How do you define equity? So we very much thank you for that input, and we will gather that from you all and review that and utilize that to inform our collective definition of that term that we will put out in the future. So thank you for your participation in that regard. And we can go ahead and take that slide down, team, as we'll collect that information and promise to get back in contact with the network regarding where the commission lands on those definitions with your input. And so if we could pull up the resource slide from our slide deck, wanting to let you all know that one of the important resources that NCAP has to offer is our upcoming Management Leadership Training Conference. It will take place in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so if you have not registered, we invite you to plan to participate with us. There will be a lot going on in terms of our 60th anniversary, but also related to equity, as well as key topics related to organizational capacity and leadership management, and really addressing those core aspects of the causes and conditions of poverty. Also, as we all know here, we are celebrating 60 years strong within the network, and Denise and the 60th anniversary committee have put together just some amazing resources on our NCAP 60th anniversary landing page. So we invite you to check that out. There has been some wonderful work done on our 60th anniversary toolkit. And what I would like to say about that toolkit is it provides some great resources and tools around facilitating awareness about community action, so fostering learning, but also fostering opportunities for connection, belonging, and just building solidarity amongst community leaders, as well as customers and local community. As Thelma and others said in the chat, our best work that we can do in terms of ensuring access to opportunity and dignity for all starts on that local level. And really, this toolkit gives you some tangible resources of what you can do to what we believe help us to collectively not only live into our community action mission, but also Dr. King's dream. Additionally, there are just some additional activities found in that on the landing page that you can take advantage of as well. So next slide. So I've already mentioned the Management Leadership Training Conference, and so we'll keep going forth. And I've mentioned that we have some equity sessions. And so yesterday was the National Day of Racial Healing. NCAP facilitated a National Racial Healing Circle, and there still will be another opportunity at MLTC to engage in racial healing circles. And then, as you can see on the screen, there will be several offerings to help our network center more deeply in equity. Next slide. And you can go to the next one as well. And so we will also, on February 21st, be offering a national webinar event called The Stages of Change, designed to empower individuals and professionals who are working with families to understand the dynamics of behavioral change. And so we invite you to check that out. Next slide. And there are a plethora of resources that the NCAP team have developed or curated over the course of the last several years. For those of you who have participated in our equity events in recent years, some of these you are familiar with, but we also have several new people to the network. And so want to let you know that we have a equity landing page on NCAP's website, and there are several of these resources that you can find. And so resources related to the pandemic, and we'll look at the next slide, as well as NCAP's declaration. I think it went live in 2021, that racism is a public health crisis. Again, it's just another tool that you can utilize on the local level to understand issues, but also to build connection and solidarity with other partners around the impacts of structural racism and strategies and solutions on the policy level, as well as the programmatic level for addressing those. Next slide. And in 2021, we hosted an awesome National Equity Summit, and all of the videos and resources from that summit are still available for network use. And again, especially for those who are new to our network. Next slide. And then we're always finding new books to read. We love to read in this network. And as it relates to equity and belonging, there are several that we have curated over the years, and you can see several of those listed on the next several slides. So Denise, if you could just scroll through those, as well as National Alliance for Homelessness. They have developed a racial equity tool related to addressing homelessness. There are resources developed by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation related to truth, racial healing, and transformation, and implementing that on the local level, as well as other resources. And so, again, all of these resources are here. We will share this slide deck with all of you. Please take advantage of those. Maybe the final thing that I will say is please look forward for some new offerings that we have from the national office. We, in 2024, will be launching what we call our National Leading Equity cohort, where community action members are invited to journey with our team over the course of a few months to learn key information, or to delve deeply into the foundations of equity and belonging and what it means to apply that on the individual, organizational, and systems level. And so stay tuned for more information about that. And so with that said, again, I want to thank you all for this opportunity today. And my favorite King quote is, injustice everywhere is injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And so hopefully we will all be committed to the pursuit of justice, because that is our everyday work as community action leaders. And so with that said, I'm going to hand off to my colleague and wonderful CEO, Denise Harlow, who will close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate your dialogue with Ms. French and being able to navigate all of the tools and resources we have available. And everybody, I hope that you give Tiffany Marley, our Senior Vice President, some shout outs too. Her work is amazing and is truly grounded in the promise of community action. So thank you, Tiffany. And thank you, everybody behind the scenes here today, for pulling together today's webinar. And a special thank you certainly to Dr. Delitzo Sulamoyo for everything you do for community action. Thank you, Ms. French, for everything you do for the families in New Orleans and beyond, and for the national partnership. Your work and life is amazing, and we stand humbly at your feet. So again, thank you for sharing yourself with us here today. That does it for us today for today's webinar. I hope that you have found some nuggets that you're able to put into your resource bank to carry you forward. 2024 is going to be, as all years tend to be, an interesting and challenging year. We don't know what it will all bring, but we encourage you to stay connected, stay engaged, live the promise of community action every day. We hope to see you in person, but if not, I hope that we'll see you back virtually for a future event online. But again, thank you for everything you do. Keep helping people and changing lives. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.